Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Dog Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. It is Wednesday, September 3rd, and we are building up in Game Week 2 to our Saturday game, Saturday, September 6th at Sanford Stadium against Austin Peay University. So, this is the portion of the week where we take a look at who our opponent is. We're going to keep this one short, and I apologize for being so late into the day. But I had some unexpected travel arrangements that took me away from my normal routine. So, despite the fact that we're on the road here, we're going to try and do a quick podcast to just take a look at Austin Peay so we can stay on track for the week. One of the good things is Austin Peay is not a very advanced opponent, so it's not like breaking down Alabama or Texas or somebody like that where we're really going to dig deep and go hard into all the little nooks and crannies of who the team is we're playing and what we know about them. In fact, I don't know very much about Austin Peay. I've tried to look up some information, and there's not a lot I can tell you about it from a football point of view. So here's what I can tell you. Austin Peay is a FCS school, which, as you may have followed, it's a little confusing these days. In the old days, it used to be D1 and D2. But nowadays, we have FBS and FCS, and that seems to confuse everybody. And FBS stands for Football Subdivision, FCS stands for Football Championship Division, which now even makes less sense because the football or football bowl subdivision used to mean that everybody went to the bowl and they didn't settle a championship on the field. Now, an FCS meant that they had a championship that was sponsored by the NCAA. Technically, that's all still true. I guess if you play in FBS, you can still go to a bowl game. And the FCS does still have a championship which is sponsored and run and administered by the NCAA, which is not true about our class of football, the football championship being run by the schools and conferences themselves and essentially ESPN, who has the contract for it. So anyway, Austin Peay is a FCS school, unlike Marshall last week, who is an FBS team. So that's a little bit different. It's a smaller school. I didn't even know. Funny memory. I mean, I have actually seen Austin Peay sporting team compete in person. Years ago, when I first got out of school from UGA, I was working down in Orlando area, and I proudly made my NCAA tournament picks. And I also was lucky enough to be near a site for first and second round games. So I got tickets and for the first time ever attended an NCAA tournament. And the first game I saw was the Austin Peay Governors. And that's when I learned, by the way, that they're Austin Peay and not Austin Peay, which is what I would have thought it was, being spelled Peay. Not to mention, I think Austin Peay sounds a little better than P, to be honest, but whatever. I didn't get a call on this. So anyway, I went to the game thinking I was going to see Austin Peay. I found out I was seeing Austin Peay, and the Governors ran up and down the court and messed up my bracket and won the game. I don't remember what kind of seed they were. They were probably an 11, 12, or 13 seed, and they won the game, messed up my bracket, and I don't remember who they were playing, but whatever. That's what I know about Austin Peay from a sporting point of view, from personal experience. So I can tell you that I didn't even know then, and I only knew recently just by looking it up today. Where is Austin Peay? What is Austin Peay? Who is Austin Peay? Well, Austin Peay is a university in Clarksville, Tennessee. It's actually a public university in the state of Tennessee. It was founded in 1927, named after a then sitting governor of the state of Tennessee, hence the nickname the Governors. They wear the colors red and white. Clarksville, Tennessee, if you've never heard of it, is a town of about 160,000 or more population, right on the northern border of Tennessee with Kentucky, kind of in the more, not quite central, but more to the western side of Kentucky, but not all the way to the western side of Kentucky and Tennessee, I should say. So the most interesting thing, some of you might know Clarksville, Tennessee, because it is the town that's closest to Fort Campbell of the Army. And Fort Campbell is home of the famous 101st Airborne. So Clarksville as a town has been around since the 1700s, and many of the people who actually started settling there after it had been mapped and charted and whatever in the late 1700s actually followed Daniel Boone's Wilderness Road to settle in Clarksville, Tennessee. So the University of Austin Peay is a public university, has about 10,000 students, around 8,000, close to 2,000 grad students, around 8,000 undergraduate students. They have been playing football for 95 years, and they have compiled a rather dismal 328, 567, and 16 record, which is 328 wins, 567 losses, and 16 ties, or a 369 winning percentage. Not overly impressive. They currently play in the United Athletic Conference, which is an amalgamation of the Atlantic Sun Conference and the Western Athletic Conference, which have been fused together. Austin Peay joined the Atlantic Sun Conference, I think, in 2022, and they had previously spent much of their time in the Ohio Valley Conference. A sad fact about leaving the Ohio Valley Conference is they no longer play for the Sergeant York Trophy, which was a trophy that was rotating between four schools that were part of the Ohio Valley Conference, but all in the state of Tennessee. Having left the Ohio Valley Conference, they've been kicked out of the running for the trophy. So they no longer have a chance to win the Sergeant York Trophy. Sergeant York Trophy was named after Alvin York, who was a World War I hero from the state of Tennessee. So there you go. Another interesting thing about Austin Peay is they have an athletic website, or a website like most schools do, both for the university and then one for their athletic department. And I kid you not, their athletic department website is letsgop.com. No joke. You know, I mean, actually, I hope it's a joke. I really do. So anyway, what do we know about them currently? Their coach is a second year coach. His name is, oh, I wrote it down, Jeff Ferris. Never heard of him, don't know where he came from. They were 5-8 last year. This year, they start off the season with a bang, though. They have something of a rivalry with Middle Tennessee State, which moved up to FBS. They're an FBS team. And some of you might remember we played at Middle Tennessee State. Tennessee plays them. A lot of SEC teams play them periodically in these kind of games like we're playing this week. Middle Tennessee State is often an invited victim for a lot of big schools, including probably Ohio State and some Big Ten teams and SEC teams. They're kind of right in the middle, so they can go around and collect a payday from a bunch of people. But Middle Tennessee State is FBS and can sometimes be a tough out. They're not always just roll over. But they may not be having their best year because Austin Peay went to their place last weekend and beat them in a game that was never in doubt. They started off with a 14-0 lead and they won 34-14 on the road. And it was their first win against an FBS team since 1987. So I don't know if that means Austin Peay is all that tough, or we should expect a really tough play with them, or harder game than the Marshall game. I don't know if I would buy that just from that, but I will say it's impressive. They went on the road and beat Middle Tennessee State. They held Middle Tennessee State to 153 total yards of offense while generating 341 yards of offense. Their quarterback, Chris Parsons, was a not overly impressive 11 of 20 for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns. They turned the ball over twice, and Middle Tennessee State didn't, and they carried the ball 47 times for 150 yards, or a 3.2-yard average, and 2 touchdowns. None of these stats jump off the page and tell you, wow, that's clearly how they won that game. But they did possess the ball for nearly 38 or over 38 minutes in the game. So, and Chris Parsons, by the way, I'm not going to find too much information or be able to tell you a lot about most of the players on their team, but Chris Parsons did spend 2 years on the Mississippi State roster. He was a quarterback on their roster, and he was used very, very sparingly. And after 2 years there, he's moved over to Austin Peay, where he now appears to be the starting quarterback. So I guess you can say they have a quarterback who at least was good enough to get a scholarship from an SEC school. So that covers really everything I know or have to tell you about Austin Peay. I guess what I would say is, just looking at this information, it looks like they mostly won the game by possessing the ball and just playing keep away. They didn't rack up a lot of yards against Middle Tennessee State. They were not super impressive through the air, but they possessed the ball and they scored points, and Middle Tennessee State never got the ball and didn't score points. So that's not a bad strategy. I suspect they'll employ the same strategy with us. They'll try to run the ball as much as they can, make short controlled passes, and try to eat as much clock as they can and shorten the game. And I got a feeling they'll be a little more successful at that than Marshall was. Maybe not at actually gaining much yardage, but just eating clock. I think they'll take their time. I think they'll keep the game slow. And I think they'll try to make sure that it's not an embarrassing and difficult day for everybody involved. My early, off the top of my head prediction, gut feeling is We win this one like 38-3. And I think that's a combination of them working hard to possess the ball and slow things down, and us not trying to, go after them too hard. I think what we will probably do, what are we going to look for? What do we want to see? Pretty much what we asked and wanted to see out of last week. We want to see both lines dominate. We don't want to see these guys run. I would prefer to not see these guys get a first down in the first half, or maybe even in the game. Wouldn't hurt my feelings if they just completely shut them down. That would upend their ability to possess the ball much, even though I said that. But I would like to see them really gain very little yardage, put no pressure on Gunner. And I think this would be a great opportunity to, having seen Gunner really run the RPO a lot last week, which led to him being our leading ball carrier as far as yardage and our second leading carrier as far as carries. I'd like to see him drop back and pass more and get the wide receivers and the tight ends into the action and focus less this week. Last week I said, I really wanted them to come out and show balance across the board. This week I think I'd really like to see them execute in the passing game. Work on the timing, work on routes against defense, work on taking the hit after the ball, after the catch that you might not get in practice these days. So I'd like to see them really advance the passing game and build some confidence. Get Gunner on his timing where he drops back, he makes his reads, picks his target, and strikes the ball downfield with some confidence. And then, in a game like this, hopefully he puts up some yards, does what he needs to do, gets a couple touchdowns, leads a few scoring drives, and is out of the game at halftime, and we let some other guys play. That's what I'd like to see. That's what I think would be ideal for the game this week. I think this is an exercise in try to stay healthy. Last week was maybe a little bit more of a week to try to, stretch out all the aspects of the game. Again, this week, I think you run a brick wall out there on defense, try and stone the run, make sure, maybe they'll try to pass the ball. I mean, who knows? Maybe I just envision them trying to minimize passes to not stop the clock. Even if you don't pick up first downs, you can at least eat clock. If you run the ball, and throw even maybe a controlled pass, like a screen pass on third down with a high percentage of completion. Even if you don't gain any yards or lose yards, the clock keeps running. So you at least burn a couple minutes every time you have the ball, even if you go 3-and-out. And I think that's what their strategy would be. I think we should help them by making sure they gain few yards. And I think this would be a good week to get our running backs up and going too. Once we establish the pass with Gunner in the first half, and then Gunner comes out of the game, then I'd like to see the running backs get good and lathered up. Everybody gets 10 carries, everybody gets 50 or more yards, and we end up grinding out yards. In the end, I guess it sounds like I'm calling for a balanced attack of passing and running, but I'm not looking for a balanced attack during the game, like run, pass, back and forth. Like I said, I'd like to see Gunner really work on passing early and get out of the game. And then I'd like to see a bunch of other people play and just run the ball and eat the clock. Let's not drag this thing out. Let's not get people hurt. And let's get on to better things. It's good to warm up. It's great to see the Dogs on the field. But by the time we get through with the first half of this game, we'll have seen all we need to see of cupcake games and, glorified practices. We're all excited to have Georgia back on the field. We're all excited to have college football back, and it was a beautiful Saturday last week. Hadn't had a chance to see what the weather would be this week. Last time I checked, it might be a little hotter, but still a nice sunny day. Just a glorious time to be out there in the early part of fall, or not quite fall, I guess. Fall technically doesn't start till September 20th, but kids are back in school. The light is starting to, fade a little earlier in the day. The sun looks a little different. Football's in the air, and we can all be excited about that. So the glory of football, though, and just being back on campus, seeing the Dogs play, is not quite enough. It's eventually we want to see some real opponents. And when this is over, we can turn our attention to Tennessee, then an off week, then Alabama. One of the things I have not talked about very much yet is Alabama. In yesterday's podcast, we went over who the other contenders are that we're comparing ourselves and judging how we're doing so far and what we're going to need from our team this season if we're going to be a contender. That's what we talked about yesterday. And you might have noticed I left Alabama out of that. I mean, after their performance, look, they certainly have the talent to be a contender. And I don't think we can count them out yet. But after the performance we saw on the field on Saturday, and I watched a fair amount of that game. I had a split screen going so I could see the Georgia game and the Alabama game. After watching that, I think we all saw it. I mean, the national media, everybody's pretty much got this one right. There's a whole question of, do we panic? Do we push the panic button? Is Alabama in trouble? I don't know that those questions make sense yet. It's too early to tell. But there is a problem. I mean, Alabama went to Florida State, a team that they're demonstrably more talented than, which is why they had um, a 14 point spread on that game in favor of Alabama, even though they were on the road. And even though Florida State has been a good team, a title contending team a couple of years ago, Alabama still has demonstrably more talent. No doubt about it. So they should have gone out there, and if they played even mano a mano, the talent should have come out on top and they should have won the game. So that means they didn't play mano a mano. That means pound for pound, player for player, they got beat. And they got beat by guys with less physical gifts and less talented players than what they have. So that's concerning. I mean, if you saw that it was a wet, rainy game and they fumbled the ball 5 times and, they just got frustrated, you'd say, wow. But that really wasn't the case. If you watched the game or seen any clips of it or just heard what people were talking about, they basically just got beat on both lines. Florida State looked like they wanted it more, looked like they played harder. They looked like the more aggressive and more dynamic team, not necessarily the better team. But that's uh, that's a problem. I mean, that's coaching. That's and again, I'm not trying to say after one season and one game, Coach DeBoer should be fired. I'm not trying to say that he's a bad coach. His record shows that he's won at every level he was at. He was in the very tiny small schools, even below FCS, but he won 3 championships and barely lost a game in several years of coaching at that level. He came up to the FBS level and eventually ended up as the head coach at Washington. He took Washington to the title game, to the national championship game, had a sterling record. This guy's been a winner, so it's not like he forgot how to coach or he doesn't know what he's doing. But whatever's going on, he's not connecting with the people that are at Alabama, the players that are at Alabama right now. He's not only not motivating them, he has somehow allowed them to become a lesser team on the field than a team that is less talented than them. So, with that in mind, if you're just talking about talent, is Alabama still a contender? Sure. Could they right the ship? Could it have been an aberration? In a couple of weeks or by the end of the season, could Alabama be 11-1 and playing for the SEC championship? Yeah, they could. It's all within reach because of how much talent they have and how much the coach has proven himself in the past to be a high quality coach. But at the moment, you look at last season and now couple it with what happened last weekend, it's hard to see it. And so Alabama has fallen into the prove it stage. And so outside of talking about what happened in Alabama, for now, we're not going to talk about them as a contender. We're not going to be deeply concerned about, are they a team that we're eyeballing and thinking, how do we measure up as far as the SEC championship goes? Now we have to play them on the field. So, and we can, everybody, it's easy to fall into the mistake. I've done it. I'm sure we've all done it before, where you see a team lose to a completely inferior team. You say, wow, we wouldn't have lost to that team. We would have killed them. So now when we play Alabama, we don't even have to worry about that now. We got that one in the bag. No, don't think like that. That's probably not the case. That kind of thinking always leads to trouble. And I certainly hope our team doesn't think that way. And I'm sure Kirby will coach around that. But let's just say that it certainly strikes me, though, that between what happened with Texas last weekend and what happened with Alabama, as we talked about last week, looking ahead in our historical grading of our team, not just this season, but across all seasons and across the historical record, I think, we have a much stronger chance after week one of possibly getting through this season with an undefeated home record and extending our streak now at 33 games, unbeaten at home, extending that to 39 or 40 coming into the early games next season. We take a look at that schedule. 58 games is the all-time record for a home winning streak. So, I mean, we're a long way from that, but all of a sudden, when you looked at this season, now look, I've left Ole Miss out of that discussion. Ole Miss is still a team that's going to have a lot to say about what happens in our record. They're going to be a good team. Probably not what they were last year, but they're still a good team and they're going to be tough to play. So we have tough home games coming. And so look, it's a long way away, but these are just the kind of things I think as Georgia fans, we want to keep an eye on, we want to think about, and it's not just the here and now. And frankly, it's a little more, why are we talking about this right now? Because we're 20 minutes into the podcast. We're supposed to be talking about this week's opponent, and I've already used up all the material I had about the opponent, and that included a deep dive into the history of the school and the town they're from. So we don't have that much to say about an opponent like this. So we've moved on, and we're looking at our historical record. We're thinking ahead already because, that's what happens after week one. You say, hey, we look pretty solid. Texas and Alabama, admittedly, playing much tougher competition. All of a sudden, though, it's not the competition. We look good, but we were playing a much lesser team than either of those teams were playing. Texas was playing on the road against a very good team, a legit top 10, top 5 team. And Alabama was playing on the road against a legitimate Power 5 conference team at home who was very motivated. We were not. So you can't compare how we looked and how they looked and say, aha, we've got the inside track on the SEC or being undefeated. What you can say, though, is that when you looked at those teams on our schedule and you thought, man, this is a gauntlet to get through. How are we going to get through this season? Maintain a home undefeated record, maybe go 11-1 or 12-0 and put ourselves in position to play for the SEC championship, get in the playoff and play for a national championship. That road looks a little easier because regardless of how we played and how they played and who the opponent was, those two teams are not what you thought they were after week one. They are not nearly as formidable looking as what you thought they were, what I thought they were coming into the season. And that's what makes the difference. So listen, we'll wrap it up for today. We're going to keep this one short because it's so late into the day. Not only do I need to move on, but you need to move on, and I'll be back early tomorrow with another regular scheduled podcast. So it'll be a regular part of your day. So we'll keep this one short so I can move on, you can move on, and we can join each other again tomorrow to continue reflecting on the Bulldogs and what's upcoming and what's ahead. Don't have a full understanding yet of what tomorrow's podcast will be. So we've still got a lot of room because we're going to leave room in the Thursday and Friday segments to dig deeper into what the media is saying, our perception of how the game is going to go, who's predicting who. These are all things that are going to be a lot more important when we play bigger games and tougher opponents starting next week. This week, we have a lot of space. And just like last week, we got into some historical perspective. We'll probably dig into some historical perspective again tomorrow and Friday, Saturday. And as a programming note, the Daily Dawg podcast is meant to be daily with one exception. I don't think I ever cleared this up. So just so you're aware, I do not expect to produce podcasts on Sunday. There may be a special edition if something's really important, something really big happens, a particularly exciting result from a big game, possibly. Maybe I'll just have too much enthusiasm to not get on a microphone and share with you guys. But in general, the Daily Dawg podcast is daily 6 days a week. Sunday excluded. So I appreciate you listening. I hope that if you're enjoying this, you'll be sharing it with other dog fans. I also, again, further ask you to take time where if you get the podcast from Substack, there's a place at the bottom of the page to include comments. If you go to Substack, you can email me and you can get on the chat that I've made available on Substack. You can send me direct messages. There's a whole bunch of different ways to reach out. Love to have comments, especially if you have questions or ideas or anything you'd like to specifically hear my perspective on or talk about. Again, I want this to be a conversation with dog fans as we not just focus in on any one game, but day in and day out, we just have that joy, that pride that comes from being a part of the red and black, a part of the Bulldog Nation, a part of the Georgia tradition. And we enjoy that. I enjoy that each and every day. I enjoy bringing these perspectives and these thoughts and these ideas and sharing them with you. And I'd love it if you'd share it with other dog fans, other sports friends who might be interested when we talk about things that might matter to them. And share some comments too, so we can have a little bit more back and forth conversation with each other. I appreciate trying to have this conversation. It feels sort of a little bit like a one-sided conversation, and some people who know me might tell you that's just the way it goes anyway, so maybe it's all just like we were talking in person anyway. But I do appreciate you. I'm glad you're here. Please spread the word. And, of course, go Dogs.